Hi all, welcome to the latest Paddock Pass podcast. We are talking in the summer break. How's the tan, Dave? I'm not too sure. Looking at you on video, if that's probably the right question.
No, well, I've got extremely shonky lighting, so it just looks like I'm completely sunburnt, even when I'm not. So I did actually get out cycling on, not yesterday, the day before yesterday, whatever day that was, and it was lovely, and hoping to go out again later on. So it's starting to enjoy summer a little bit.
Neil, how is the sheet of perspiration? Are you managing okay?
Yeah, you can see I've really picked up a tan in the sunshine here in Barcelona over the last couple of days. I've actually been down by the beach, but with several layers of sun cream on, a protective neck scarf, protective hat, and parasol as well. So thankfully, been well protected.
You were sitting there in your beach coffin.
Exactly, yeah. With a protective layer on top of that.
Exactly. Protective layer of Transylvanian earth just to make sure nothing gets through.
Is it my mistake, or are you two looking more chipper than usual? Is this because the European Championship has finally finished and the desired result ended up being that way? I have to admit, I'm just about recovering my smile.
No, I've mentioned this in our private chats as well. I actually wanted Spain to lose mainly because there's one particular journalist who I wanted to be very, very miserable. So no names, no pack drill, but it just would have been very, very funny. So I'm in all sporting events in which I have no interest. Really, I'm just for the most banter outcome possible.
I watched the final with 3 Englishmen. Adam, I'd like to let you know that I was very, very well behaved, and I acted with great dignity, and put an arm around the shoulder of all. And it might have been slightly dishonest from my part, but at least I was not trying to be an arsehole.
I bet you were leaping around the room, going yes every time Swain scored. Yes.
No, I just sat in silence. And screamed
did you
inside.
find somebody to high five afterwards, Neil, or did you manage to let it out in that way?
Yeah, just sort of a few private text messages here and there, exchanged between Northern Irish and Scottish friends, but nothing more than that.
I've rarely seen my 15-year-old son more disappointed, I have to say. That was it was a bit of a heartbreaker. But anyway, enough football. We're doing a show in the midst of the MotoGP summer break. Obviously not a great deal to talk about, but we do have quite a cool show today because we speak to David Alonso, the Moto3 sensation, of course, in his second year in Grand Prix racing. And Neil and I spoke to him at the recent TT Circuit Assen Grand Prix. And it was a pretty good chat, I have to say. And but before we get on to David, and we address various topics such as his excellence, his formidability at the end of races, and that whole Colombian thing. Guys, there's also been some news, hasn't there? Because not only are British fans going to be disappointed that Cal Crutchlow won't be racing at the British Grand Prix, the next round of MotoGP, the first weekend in August, due to complications from his recent wrist surgery. But also we have finally confirmation that Kazakhstan will not be on the 2024 calendar, has been replaced by Misano for what is essentially a double header or back-to-back races at the Misano World Circuit, Marco Simoncelli. First of all, thoughts on the Yamaha situation and Remy Gardner taking a second turn on the M1. I guess that's pretty good for the Australian. And Dave, he was dealing with quite a few questions at Sachsenring last time about, possibly the Yamaha door creaking open slightly for a re-entry to MotoGP. Can we build or think much more about this, with Rennie making another appearance?
I'm not sure. That's not the impression that I get from speaking to people. However, I do think it's certainly very useful for him. It's also very useful for Yamaha because he does get used as a guinea pig, if you like. That was certainly his role at the Sachsenring. He was testing some of the parts that they had tested previously. So, for example, the new automatic ride height device, where you book, instead of having to operate it as you come out the corner, you book it. So you press a button telling the thing you want it to auto engage to drop the rear at the appropriate moment, and then there's lots of sort of plumbing that allows you to do that sort of takes that on for you. They tested it at a private test, Fabio Quartararo and I think Alex Rins but they didn't actually have a chance to race it, and this gave Yamaha a chance to use it on a race weekend to see how it works. So yeah, I mean he's extremely useful. I think it is slightly worrying for Yamaha that Cal is having these issues with his wrist, and I mean obviously we hope he gets well soon, that he makes a full recovery for him. But it is going to be a bit of a damper on their testing program. There's a test ban at the moment. There's no testing during the summer break, so they'll have to hope that he's back to full fitness when he basically once we return.
When did that kick in though, Dave? Because I think Polo Spargaro was actually testing a Red Bull ring, wasn't he, last week? I mean, maybe it's a certain fact. Maybe the testing ban only applies to factory riders or MotoGP riders.
No, correct. So basically, the test ban it's basically the same as the winter test ban, where like you'll see Stefan Bradl and Polo Spargaro circulating in January. But all of the riders with or all of the factories with concessions they are not allowed to test during the test ban, but they are allowed to test in season at certain private tests.
Neil, Silverstone is one of the longest and trickiest tracks on the calendar. It's a big if, but if Remy Gardner has an impressive Grand Prix, would this also improve his chances for getting MotoGP next year, or is this just a case of we need to put the bike on the track, we need a decent rider to do it, and Remy obviously acquitted himself pretty decently in Germany.
Yeah, I think Remy definitely did that. I think it shows that Yamaha thinks highly of what Remy's doing currently in World Superbike. He definitely has shown a considerable step forward from 23 to 24. It looks like he has realistic aims to be top 5 in the championship this year, which is a good step forward in his second year. But I don't get the impression that he's under consideration for a full-time MotoGP ride next year. I think back in Assen, Lynn Jarvis went on the record to say that they're looking at people within the Grand Prix paddock currently for seats in the Pramac racing team next year, and they obviously hope to keep Alex Rins in the factory team. So I would be very, very surprised if Remy kind of emerged as a contender for one of those Pramac seats. I think it's more likely to be a current MotoGP rider or two current MotoGP riders, maybe one of the kind of the class of Moto2. But yeah, I would be surprised if it was Remy, no matter how well he kind of acquitted himself in Germany.
Dave, just coming back to the Yamaha thing for a moment, you were talking about the new sort of ride height device they're trialing, and Gardner could be using it again, or even the whole sort of factory lineup. Just speculation on your part, how much are Yamaha going to invest in something like that with the knowledge that in 2 seasons' time it's redundant? Do they get to a point where they think, okay, maybe this will get us a couple of Grand Prix wins in 2026 or at the end of 2025? What's your thinking on it?
I mean, there are 2.5 seasons to go, so that's a lot of that's a lot of racing, So they will keep on inventing. I expect to see people certainly investing in these sort of things right up until the beginning of the 26th season. That's certainly been the case in the past, where what you see is sort of at the beginning of the final season of a particular sort of format. You'll see investment sort of start to run down a little bit in the current spec, and it starts to ramp up on the new spec. So they're definitely going to keep on investing it this year, and then invest in it next year, and they need it. It's exactly the kind of technology that they need if they are to return to competitiveness, because it makes such a huge difference.
In other news, round 14 of the MotoGP calendar was going to be in Kazakhstan. As we know, it had been shifted and postponed, mainly due to flooding that was cited around the region and the logistical difficulties in getting the Grand Prix up and running. If we're worried about our tan, guys, we got pretty much a whole month of MotoGP racing in, Eastern Italy to come in September. And not only do we have the San Marino Grand Prix followed by the one-day test, but then we're going straight back for a doubleheader, the Grand Prix of Emilia-Romagna, I think they've called it. So thoughts on this, because it does look almost like a post-pandemic sort of calendar shuffle where, Dorna Sports are having trouble confirming venues, locations, whatever else. But there's a bit more to this, isn't there? I think, the speculation on certain territories and circuits just really hasn't come to pass.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at it. You have to look at the bare facts, and we started the year as a 22 race calendar, and 3 of those races have not come to pass. I think you can kind of say Argentina was fairly exceptional. The political situation changed there fairly rapidly, and we had gone to Argentina many times before without problems, maybe with the exception of, when was it, 2022, when we had those logistical difficulties coming from Lombok, I think it was. But generally, the Argentina Grand Prix in Termas de Rio Hondo was passed without major incident. So I think we can maybe excuse that one. But then the other 2, with Kazakhstan getting postponed first and then cancelled, maybe not the best look. I mean, it's good that they found a solution. Misano, I think, is a good logistical solution. We don't have to transport things from Misano because we're there the 2 weeks before, and getting things from Europe out to Lombok should be okay. But yeah, I think whenever a calendar's made, you can maybe say, okay, one change, 2 changes max can sometimes happen, but when it's 3, then it maybe doesn't have the best look.
That is fairly accurate. I'd add a few things. Yeah, certainly Argentina, there was a radical political change that was difficult to predict. Not a lot Dorna could do about that. India, look, in the end, I think actually everyone wins with the change with India, because I think racing there in March is going to be much better for everyone, including the riders, the teams, and especially the marshals who've got to stand out there in the heat, because there were real problems with it holding it in September. So it sort of worked out for the best. I think also there was some sort of bargaining going on there. But the trouble with putting Kazakhstan on the calendar is it's such a flaky situation. It's such a risk that if they hadn't have lost Argentina, if they hadn't have lost sort of India, then it might have been the sort of risk that you can take. We'll put it on, and if we get paid anyway. We don't lose if it happens. But the trouble is they've signed up all of these TV contracts. Now it is my understanding, though I don't know this for sure, that there is that basically Dorna has promised TV broadcasters 20 race minimum, so they had to find a 20th round, or else there would have been severe financial penalties. Then it starts to get very, very expensive. And I think the worst thing is the most undignified scrabbling around looking for a circuit, because it was going to be Qatar, and then Qatar wasn't interested. There was talk of it being maybe Portimao, it being maybe Brno, but Brno would have to be resurfaced. There was talk of it, maybe being Valencia. And then it was Misano again. We end up in Misano, and you say, at least we can leave everything there. Well, we can't quite, because there is a massive bicycle event the weekend in between, and so the whole paddock's going to have to be filled up and packed up, and then it's going to have to be emptied again, moved out again, and then they'll have to come back again a week later and rebuild the whole thing again. So it's sort of, it's very slightly farcical, and there is, even though the logistics is, it should be okay. I would risk a small amount of money on there being a delay to proceedings at Lombok on Friday for containers not turning up on time or whatever, because it should be fine as long as everything runs perfectly. So, we know how things work out when we bet on things running perfectly.
Yeah, this is 2024 after all.
Just yes, exactly. When everything, logistics, never been any problems at all with logistics in recent years. Certainly not. No, it all goes absolutely swimmingly.
Global situation entirely favourable.
Exactly.
Just a quick question. I mean, at the start of the year, I think it was announced that there was a track in Hungary, which is going to be the reserve circuit. And it seems strange that we've had these cancellations, yet we're not going to Hungary.
My understanding is that track, again, is just not ready. It was never really, it was more of a placeholder than anything else. The long-term plan I get from talking to people who know about these things, is that the point is to go back to the Hungaro ring. They want to go back to the Hungaro ring because the Hungaro ring is right next to Budapest. It's extremely convenient. But the Hungaro ring needs a lot of work to make it, safe to run a MotoGP event, and also just to make it, to bring it up to spec for F1 as well. So there's going to have to be a lot of time done there. World Superbikes was supposed to go to the Balaton Park, not Balaton Ring, because there's been so many tracks around Lake Balaton that it's hard to keep track. But they're not going either. That one's been scrapped. So it's all a lot of things are being signed on spec. I really think this year that Dorna overreached themselves. They had a few too many balls in the air, and I really think that losing Argentina was the one wild card they hadn't gambled on. They would have got away with, because if we hadn't lost Argentina, if we'd gone to Argentina, they could have lost Kazakhstan, they could have lost India, and it still would have been 20 races, and everything would have been fine. But losing Argentina completely beyond their control meant that we're stuck with this sort of, scrabbling around, desperately begging racetracks, can they please put on a MotoGP round?
I mean, we've kind of been over some of this before, so I don't want to rake it up again, but I do have a degree of sympathy with the promoters, because having been to India last year and experienced firsthand that's a clusterfuck it was to get visas to get to the Grand Prix, and how late and how it affected a lot of people in terms of flight and organization. It was not a smooth experience. So I can only imagine dealing with the promoters and therefore the government authorities to be able to get paid in time. We don't quite know the full extent of the truth around the deal, whether Dorna is still waiting for fees from 2023 or they're still waiting for, an upfront payment for 2024. And I think, I would not implore, but I would suggest that somebody from Dorna, whether it's Carlos or Carmelo Espeleta or somebody, maybe talks to the media or gives a bit of a public statement on some of the shape of the calendar, just to provide some transparency. That would probably help the next time we sort of gather in Great Britain. But, moving on from that, of course, we go to Misano twice, and you guys have spoken about the logistical side of this, but what about actually racing there, back to back? I think Misano is a pretty good venue, right? It's not the sexiest Grand Prix on the calendar in terms of huge attendances or a circuit that's, 5-star in terms of setup and facilities, but it is historic. It usually has a pretty good location for weather, even though that can veer drastically towards one other extreme. Cheap pizza, Neil, I guess that's another thing.
€5 pizzas. I mean, what's to complain about? But yeah, it is generally a decent location. I think you can guarantee a decent attendance at both weekends. Italy obviously being one of the bigger countries for MotoGP. Logistically, it's easy for the majority of the paddock to get to and from. I think that probably counts in its favor as well. And we have done this before. 2020, 2021. I think we did have 2 races in Misano. They were back to back in 2020. I think one of the races was cancelled late on in 2021, and we went back to Misano for a second time. So, we've done it before, and it's not ideal, but it's a working solution. So, I can definitely think of worse places to do it. Also, I managed to book my flights and book my hotel for, I think, a combined price of €300 yesterday. So, I mean, in that regard as well, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean the downside is that for the second round, everyone has got all of the data. It just becomes everyone
and after the
knows
test.
Yeah, exactly, because we're going to have the race and then the test on Monday, and then 2 weeks later another race, and we saw that especially during the sort of the pandemic year, but also 2021. I think 2021 perhaps a little bit more, where we had a couple of places where we were doing 2 races at the same track. The second race, everyone has everything completely dialed in, and that makes it a bit more predictable, a little less exciting.
Yeah, and can we just cancel the Friday and the second weekend, please? Because there's nothing quite as tedious as the Friday of a second weekend at the same circuit. Because, as Dave said, we kind of know everything already. And, it feels like we're just going round in circles for the sake of it.
absolutely genius idea. I fully endorse this. Neil Morrison for Dorna CEO.
I think I could feel Neil's enthusiasm for Moto2 FP2 already. It's just shining through the screen right now. I mean, of course, one disadvantage as well is that we're going into the VR46 Academy playground. Maybe an advantage is that we're not having just another race in Spain. So there are kind of, pros and cons wherever you look at it. So, but anyway, round 14 is sorted. We do have a 20-round calendar and some more cheap pizza, as we said. At this point in the podcast, guys, I remind you that we're backed by Renthal Street. So if you do have a street bike, a road bike, you're looking for some aftermarket accessories, then check out renthal.com. They have some fantastic products on there. They back us, we back them. And if you put them on your motorcycle, then you will not be disappointed. KTM as well. KTM have given us some support for 2024. So look at ktm.com if you're in the market for a road bike, an adventure bike, a naked bike. There's a huge catalogue of products there to choose from. Fly Racing, of course, are celebrating their 25th anniversary in 2024, have some fantastic helmets, as we mentioned regularly on the pod, but also some great apparel when it comes to protection and generally riding a street bike. If you're in for a new jacket, some trousers, some pants, whatever, then have a look at flyracing.com. We can heartily recommend those guys. We're going to move on to our David Alonso interview in a moment, but Neil, when we made this interview with the youngster in Assen, it kind of got us thinking a little bit as well about some riders that have, burned so brightly into MotoGP and, made a huge impression. And there are obvious names that come to mind. But we're also discussing just before we're recording the podcast about some riders that have come into Grand Prix and you think, wow, here we go. This is a generational talent. This is going to be a next multi-world champion. And it hasn't really sort of worked out that way. Are there any names? Could we just throw some names at each other that, we think, wow, why did that not work?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few that we could probably throw at each other at. Just to preface this, it's always quite dangerous, I feel, doing this when you sort of watch a rider coming through in Moto3 to big them up is like the next big thing. But watching what David Alonso has done in the Moto3 World Championship in his 1.5 seasons so far, and then when you combine that with the kind of the person that he is off the bike, I think it really does give you confidence that he is destined for the very top, and that he is kind of a real deal. But yeah, I will freely admit that I've said that about quite a few riders in the past, and have written stories saying this is the future of MotoGP, and it's not quite come to pass.
And so it's your fault.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a very mixed bag, a mixed track record in terms of bigging up young talents. But, occasionally a rider will do something where you're like, okay, I mean, like, that is just so ridiculous that clearly they're going to be incredibly good. Like you think about Marc Marquez and what he did in Moto2 at Motegi when he sort of almost stalled it on the grid and, was into the first turn pretty much last and managed to recover to win the race, or what he did at Estoril in 2010, or Pedro Acosta, what he did in Doha in 2021. Those things are just not normal. And, that's sort of a very clear indicator that they're going right the way to the top. But in terms of names that haven't quite done it, who I've looked at in junior categories and then haven't quite lived up to the billing, I guess you could say, Maverick Vinales is a clear one that comes to my mind. Especially after what he first did with Suzuki. I was absolutely convinced that Maverick was going to be a MotoGP champion. Hasn't quite come to pass. I have to also maybe say Scott Redding is probably one that I watched in Moto2 and also 125s. He was on the front row in his first ever 125 Grand Prix as a 15-year-old. That is not normal. Redding's MotoGP career, that was sort of the start of his life at Pramac Ducati in 2016, where it looked like he could maybe be a GP winner, but it just never quite happened. So those are two of the biggest names that come to my mind. I'm sure you guys have a few more.
I think Maverick Vinales still thinks he's going to be a MotoGP champion, Neil, despite all the evidence to the contrary.
And Adam.
Yes, indeed.
Isn't it a bit harsh? He was world champion. He's won races in every category. So it's hardly like he's had a disastrous career.
No, he's been fantastic. He's been absolutely fantastic. Incredibly talented rider, just missing that little bit to make the difference. And also, he's when he came into MotoGP, he was racing against Marc Marquez and Valentino Rossi, which is a tough crowd, as you might say. So
Jorge Lorenzo and Dani Pedrosa as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. These are not these are not dishcloths you're going up against. These are proper. These are some of the best riders in the world. Like even all the people he's had to ride against, you would put all of them in the top. Certainly in the top 10, maybe in the top 6, 7. There's you can argue about where to put some of those riders, but Marc Marquez and Valentino Rossi. It doesn't matter which order you put them in, but they are probably the two best riders in the history of motorcycle racing. So anyone coming into the class is going to have to face them. So yeah, I mean, I made quite a long list, but mostly of people who never really broke out of the junior classes. People you saw. I mean, I remember, for example, very, very clearly being what would have been 2012, 2013, something like that. Talking to people in Red Bull Rookies about Karel Hanneke, who was absolutely destroying the field, making people look really, really silly. And yet he never even made it into Moto3. Like the step from Red Bull Rookies to Moto3 was already so enormous that it became sort of insurmountable. Or you look at, for example, Romano Fenati, who won a phenomenal race in his was he wins his second race, won it really, really convincingly. Seconds. Yeah, exactly. He looked so strong, and even all throughout his career, he's looked really, really strong. In Moto3, but then he went to Moto2, and he sort of just disappeared. There's a lot of those sort of riders who you can see the raw talent that they've got, and then they move up a class, and then it just seems to sort of completely disappear. Danny Kent is another one. Danny Kent won a world championship, looked outstanding, and could never make the really could make the promotion to Moto2, could never make Moto2 work, and only really started to find his feet again recently, sort of by racing in BSB.
Neil, he's talking about Moto3. Are we on the right podcast here, or?
I don't know if you've listened to any of our recent podcasts, though, Ed, but there's actually been, I think we've spoken about Moto3 more than MotoGP the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
it's been very exciting.
Goodness. My nomination, I think perhaps it's a bit harsh, but Ben Spies. I think he came into MotoGP as a World Superbike champion. He was initially sort of a Tech 3 Yamaha rider. I think he finished. Actually, I was looking up earlier today. I mean, he qualified 12th in his first Grand Prix as a wild card, and managed to push all the way up to 7th. I mean, we know the Yamaha was probably in its prime, beginning of sort of the second decade of the century up until sort of the later years when Fabio Quartararo was taking it, as a satellite rider to, a championship fight with Marc Marquez. But, I think we just maybe expected a bit more of him. He had a pretty decent first season, finished 6th in the championship. Second year, went into the factory team, got that win, finished 5th. And then sort of, career sort of stalled really. I mean, injury problems, of course, illness problems. And maybe there was just too much expectation on him as being the sort of savior of American racing at the time, when there was no one else apart from sort of Nicky Hayden and Colin Edwards also in the class trying to sort of make their presence felt. But I think, Ben had a good career and he won a lot, but then I think maybe we expected a bit more of him at MotoGP level.
I think what he did in World Superbikes is what really surprised people. Like coming in as a rookie and winning in his first year, that was just astonishing. That was an amazing achievement. Coming into MotoGP, he had a good year at Tech 3. He had a very strong year in his first year with the factory Yamaha team. Didn't work out the second time, but I think it didn't work out. I mean, there was injuries there which played a role, and injuries are always that in the end those injuries basically ended his career. The shoulder injury meant that he just wasn't physically capable of racing a MotoGP bike any longer. But it felt like just the relationship within that within the team fell apart. It just didn't work inside of those teams. And it's an object lesson in how important it is to actually build a team around you to make the team work. And to an extent, one of the most interesting things is seeing how Marquez has been able to build a team that works around him at Gresini. That, I think, is much more impressive than just, switching bikes. Actually switching teams and making that team work is an absolutely key skill and a really, really important, ingredient in success.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Dave. And just to kind of contribute another couple of names, I mean, we were talking about riders that have come through the junior categories and haven't quite lived up to billing, even going back further than Spies. I remember thinking Colin Edwards was potentially going to be a MotoGP world champion in about 2004. He'd obviously won the World Superbike Series in 2002 in such a brilliant way, came into MotoGP in Aprilia. Obviously, that was not a competitive package. Then jumped onto a satellite Honda, and just was never really okay. He came close to winning a race in Assen 2006, notably, but was never the kind of the rider fighting for victories. Nowhere near fighting for championships like the rider we saw in Superbikes. So I thought that was maybe another entry of a rider that didn't quite live up to what I was particularly expecting. And another one, the youngest Grand Prix winner in history, Jan Oncu, won his first Grand Prix in the rain in Valencia 2018. And that was, I guess we can say, a pretty weird weekend. It was pissing down from Friday right the way through to Sunday. People either got the cold, the flu, or terrible food poisoning in our sort of colleague group. That weekend is kind of talked in like hushed tones of like, oh, never ever mention that again. But Jan Oncu, what he did was pretty impressive nonetheless. Coming in, I think he just won the Red Bull Rookies Cup, and therefore, because he was 15, he was excused from riding underage. He was 15 years, 115 days old. I remember in the press conference after that race thinking, wow, this is the start of something special. Yet you look at the Moto3 Championship the next year and Jan Oncu finished 31st with 8 points to his name, and then he was off to World Supersport just after that. And yes, he's gone on to become a competitive World Supersport rider, but has not had the career that I think anyone was expecting he would have had back in that wet day in Valencia. So another one I would throw into the mix.
I think also the crossover from World Superbikes to MotoGP is very, very interesting because there have been so few riders who've done it sort of successfully. Certainly no one who's come across and won a championship. Cal Crutchlow has been incredibly successful at making the switch. But he was only briefly in World Superbikes, really. But if you think about it, like not just Colin Edwards came at the same time as Colin Edwards came across, Troy Bayliss came across, and Troy had a decent career in MotoGP, went away, then came back, did a wild card on the in 2006 at Valencia, which just turned him into an absolute legend. But sort of up until Jonathan Ray came along, and then Toprak Razgatlioglu came along, Troy Bayliss was the greatest World Superbike rider to have competed. The argument would then be Fogarty Bayliss sort of thing, but Bayliss's quality was absolutely untouched in World Superbikes, but he really struggled in MotoGP, and I think we're going to have to try to get an ex World Superbike rider on to discuss why that should be.
I know that I'm going to incur the ridicule and wrath of not just you, but anyone that's listening to this podcast, as well as many people that might not be listening to it, but just what Dani Pedrosa did in the 125 and 250cc class. I know he went on to have a really successful MotoGP career, 30 plus wins, twice runner-up in the championship, quite unlucky not to win a championship, but I remember watching him in the 250 class when he racked up 2 championships in his first and second years. I remember thinking, like, this guy is going to be like Rossi, he's going to win 5, 6, 7 MotoGP championships. Just everything seemed to be in place. And I remember just being a little bit disappointed for, the first 4 or 5 years of Pedrosa's MotoGP career, where I thought, it's just not clicked. It's not the same rider. No, I know I'm being pretty harsh. He had a great MotoGP career.
How the fuck do you go from Jan Oncu to Dani Pedrosa?
Yeah, I mean, second and third in the MotoGP Championship.
I know I've opened myself up for ridicule, but
yeah.
But if the expectations that you would have had watching him as a 250 rider didn't quite come to pass in MotoGP.
Again, what's interesting about Pedrosa? I mean, I disagree. Again, Pedrosa came in. Yeah, exactly. He's racing against Casey Stoner and Casey Stoner and Valentino Rossi, and he regularly beat them, which is just
his record in 250s and 125 was even more impressive than theirs. In fact, he kicked Stoner's ass quite regularly in 125 and 250s. Yet
exactly.
Honda.
Sure, but still,
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think also there is I think in MotoGP his physicality, his size worked against him. It also worked it worked in his favour, and he had to be a much better rider to be able to control that bike rather than anyone else. But it would have been really interesting to see Pedrosa on a 500 because they were much lighter, less powerful, and not quite as physically intimidating as a MotoGP bike. I think being on a MotoGP bike, which were 170 kilos or something instead of the 130 kilos of a 500, that's a huge difference, and I think it would have been really interesting to see Pedrosa on a 500. I think things would have turned out different if they'd have still been racing 500 two-strokes.
Now that I've torched whatever flimsy reputation I may have had in the past, I guess it's time to ask, let's flip it. Which riders have succeeded that you thought had no hope in hell of succeeding?
Well, I'm going to say Pecco Bagnaia because you saw Bagnaia in Moto3 was pretty good, not amazing. He was impressive actually on the MotoGP bike, on the Ducati, when he had that in 2017, I think, a single ride in 17 on the bike at Valencia. But I didn't think he came into MotoGP, the test at Sepang was immediately fast, and then he just sort of disappeared off of the radar. Just really did not do anything to do anything. And then I think over the last maybe 3-4 seasons, especially the last 3 seasons, he's been incredible. It's just been his growth in his riding, in his approach, in everything has been just astonishing. And I think that has been really impressive to see.
Even though he was very much a reference in what is now junior GP, I mean, could we say Fabio Quartararo for this? Because after two dodgy seasons in Moto3, things were looking a little bit circumspect for him in Moto2. Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a stop and go chassis he won the GP on finally in Catalunya and also Essen. Speed Up, that was it. Of course, Stop and Go is a superbike team. I knew it began with S, but I think when he was sort of signed by Wilco Zeelenberg and the old RNF team to ride sort of that the M1 Yamaha, it was the right rider at the right bike at the right opportunity at the right time, and that really sort of kicked his career into overdrive. But otherwise, he could have been one of these guys, maybe like a Lorenzo Baldassari, where you think, they're really coming through, they're reaching a high point, that but then ended up getting stuck in sort of Moto2 sort of mire.
Yeah, I mean, if it hadn't have been for that win at Assen for Quartararo, Barcelona, sorry, yes. If it hadn't been for that, because it was Barcelona and then Assen, I think that he won. But if it hadn't been for that win in Barcelona, then there's every chance that he wouldn't have got a chance. He would have been off to, I don't know, superbikes or a paying ride or something else. So yeah, it's astonishing, and he has shown to be absolutely one of the best riders in the world.
Yeah. Second at Assen. Sorry to be a pedant, Div, but anyway,
I can't remember. I'm old. I don't have to do all this memory stuff. What I do is go to the MotoGP.com and look up the results.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's two ways to look at it. I think your points are very valid. You could also, when he did come into Moto3 as a double junior GP champion, he was, the first half of that year was pretty phenomenal. I think he was second in his second Grand Prix. He came within a corner of winning his fourth Grand Prix which is pretty impressive stuff. If Moto3 rider did that this year, you'd be like, okay, wow, this kid really is living up to the hype. But yeah, he did have those years in the wilderness, and a couple of wrong decisions, a couple of wrong turns definitely didn't help. I guess I would probably have to say Fabio Di Giannantonio, if I'm being honest. He was a good rider in Moto3, second in the championship in 2018, good achievement. But I didn't really see a great deal from him in Moto2 to suggest that he would go on to become a really, really solid MotoGP rider. And actually coveted by the top MotoGP manufacturer, and possibly even offered, the full factory spec bike, maybe not in the factory team, but in one of its satellite teams. So yeah, I think Di Giannantonio's recent arc has probably been one of the most surprising for me as a rider that I had written off in the past.
Maybe we can file Franco Morbidelli in there as well, Neil. Sort of a capable Moto2 rider, was learning his apprenticeship. But then, he reached a point where he finally won the title, and then has been a little bit up and down, but there have definitely been ups in MotoGP. So you do have names, and the longer you dive into it, the more you can sort of make cases for quite a few riders. But I mean, as you mentioned on the top of this section, we shouldn't hype David Alonso too much, but then it's really difficult not to, because he just looks that good. And very quickly, he's native Spanish born. His English is improving a lot, and he sort of has a confidence, doesn't he? When we sat down with him, we both sort of left the Aspar Hospitality thinking, what a cool kid. It was like this very amiable, confident, made a lot of eye contact younger brother. You almost wanted to warn him about the possible perils of love and women and drinking too much, and, or the perils of youth. I'm sure you can remember those as well, Dave. It's it was a good sit down, right?
It was, yeah. I mean, I don't have a daughter. In fact, none of us have daughters, but if we did, he's the kind of chap that you would be quite happy showed up at your front door with, a bouquet of flowers. You would be thinking, okay, yeah, that's a good choice. I'm happy with that, because it, as well as, being intelligent and bright and fun, he's just a really nice, sound lad. Airs of Graces, I think, comes to mind. A lot of riders come into the paddock, and when they start having really quite immediate success, they obviously start believing the hype, and with some justification, they become a brand, they become wanted, they become an object of attention and desire. So, obviously their egos are going to inflate, but I think what stands out about David Alonso is just how nice he continues to be. So, I think that comes across in the interview.
Well, for the first time on the Paddock Pals podcast, here is David Alonso. We're inside the CF Moto Aspar Team Hospitality, and it's fantastic for us, Neil and I, to be joined by David Alonso. David, thank you for coming on the podcast. We simply had to talk to you because, your impact in Moto3 and World Championship racing in the last year and a half has been amazing. It's been a pleasure to watch you and to see some of the battles that you've been having. I guess I'll take the first question, Neil. We have to ask you about your ability on the last lap of races, because I think it's something that race fans around the world are amazed at, because you seem to be so calm, calculating. It's almost like you have a strategy every GP. How is it from where you're sitting on the bike?
Yeah. Hello, both. Nice to be here on the podcast. And well, I am happy that the fans like it. I try to do my best on racing, and then trying to not only race, think up on the bike. Meanwhile I'm riding, try to think about last corner, about last lap, about different strategy for be prepared for the end of the race.
How can you prepare for that, David? Because obviously Moto3 is such an intense style of racing with a lot of riders battling and fighting. You have to remain very calm during the fight. I mean, how can you prepare for that?
Yeah, well, first of all, you must work well during the weekend. Friday, Saturday are important have a good pace, because if you have a good pace, even you are on the group, you are more, let's say, comfortable if you had worked well Friday and Saturday. So that's the first point. And then, for example, trying to be calm, to breathe on the straights, like not going the heart rate, trying to be low. It's difficult in that moment, but trying to get as lower as possible for think better.
Yeah, so if you have a more prepared feeling on the bike and you're, I guess, fitter, then that helps.
Yeah, first of all, the working on the Friday and Saturday, and then working on yourself, on your like kind of meditation or mindset. Yeah.
Meditation, really?
Yeah.
Is that something you look at? I mean, is it a way of training, doing different things?
It's one thing we had this year during the end of the day before going to sleep. We had it, and yeah, it's working well, because the days here in the MotoGP paddock are so intense. For me, I noticed the change between last year and this year, and now, yes, it's normal when you get more on the front. It's like the day more intense. It is a more intense day, so it's good for relax before going to sleep.
Excellent, yeah. David, I guess a lot of our listeners would like to know a bit about your history, because I guess we don't see a lot of Colombians riding at the front of the Moto3 class or Moto2 or MotoGP. How did your journey start? How did you start in the world of motorcycle racing?
Well, I started at 5 years old. The first time I took a bike, and then 6 years old I started to race. That was the minimum age at Spain, and it was like nobody of my family was related with competition, neither with bikes. Only the only thing, my father have a street bike for do some route, have fun on weekends, and that's it. But I remember that I was a child, and I when I watched the races on TV, they catch my interest, for sure. They catch my interest, and then for Christmas, for birthdays, instead of asking a bowl or something like that, I asked something with wheels, like a toy with wheels, the bike toy that you play with the legs or something, always like that.
Did your family take you to some races? Did you go to Barcelona or Jerez or any of the Spanish-based GPs?
I remember one, not at that beginning, a little bit more, maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 years, I don't know, but I remember Chester, Valencia.
Yeah.
Valencia GP, the last race, I went there. And I remember it was funny, because we went with another child that also ride in the same school I was riding the bike, and we went into the paddock with the suits we were wearing at that age. So we were working with the paddock with the suits. So it was like we were
part of the paddock, yeah.
Yeah. All people looking us, and Valentino Rossi was at that moment in Ducati, and he came out of the trucks, all people looking for his sign, and we were with the suits. So when Valentino see both of us that we were with the suits, he say, both of you kids come to me, and we take the photo with Valentino. Yeah, I have the photo at home.
Fantastic, yeah. A great early experience.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Spain, right? What is the link with Colombia?
Yeah, the obviously link is my mother. It's my mother is from Colombia. Yeah, my father from Spain. I born in Madrid, Spain, but yeah, we did it for representing my mother's flag. That was the main reason.
You're based near Madrid, right? I mean, for training and for moving around, that must be quite useful. You've been doing some stuff with the Marquez brothers as well?
Yeah. Well, I live not. I born in Madrid. I live like near Madrid, 45 minutes. I live in Guadalajara. It's close, and well, the Marquez brothers came to Madrid, and this summer break of June, I had the chance to train with them in Aragon. We went there one day with also more Moto2 riders like Fermin, Arenas. Yeah, it was nice.
How was the experience of actually riding on track just behind someone like Marc Marquez, an 8-time world champion?
Wow, the experience is like no word. You know, when I remember when he passed me, and I just could follow like 3 corners, but that 3 corners were like, wow, I am following 8-time world championship rider, and it was crazy feeling. Yeah. I was surprised. I even cannot ride well because I was just looking him that I was back, and I even cannot concentrate on riding well.
Did you show him the photo of you of Valentino?
No, I didn't show him yet. Maybe one time.
David, on the subject of the riding, why are you so good? What do you think you have that's special that makes you stand out, that can win Moto3 GPs in your first season?
Well, I just do my best, and no special, no, because I just like look on the. I am trying to do things like other people did it in the past, like people that did it well. So I like to look on different styles, different riders, for try to get as much information and then mix it all together for be as complete as possible.
Yeah, because after your victory in Barcelona this year, you said that your inspiration was watching Ethan Guevara, who did a similar race in 2022, and you had studied his race and how he managed to break away from everyone towards the end. And, it's clear that you're looking at other races, other riders, and how they've done things.
Yeah, it's nice because for always have like an inspiration in anyone, and because the way I am doing now, like people did it on the past, they already go in these steps, so we can I can learn from them, because it can help me like as inspiration.
Yeah.
This year you changed from red to blue.
Yeah.
You're riding and working a little bit with the Chinese.
How it looks? You like it, blue?
I think, blue's a bit better. Was it blue, green? It's a bit of a mix, right?
I like it also better than red. The first time, honestly, it was strange and like scary, because many times with red, they say you at the beginning blue, Moto, but then it was, I really like it, yeah.
How do you find working with the Chinese? Because they're very enthusiastic, aren't they? They're very excited. They want to know more about Moto3 because they're quite new to this world.
Yeah, the change has been really, really good. It has been very positive, because if Moto really want to do things well, they support us with huge effort, and they put the passion that we need. So yeah, the change, it was very positive, and also they are very happy. They are very happy with us, and well, they give us the tool for do our best on the track.
David, you won the Red Bull Rookies Cup in 2021. I think a lot of people expected you to come to Moto3 in 2022, but it was decided you were going to wait a year before 2023. Was that a little frustrating to have to wait, or what was the reason behind that?
Well, honestly, we had it at that time. We had it very clear that I win Rookies Cup, but I won Rookies Cup, but not I was not prepared for going to the Moto3 class. So we were very like we had the mentality of prepare 1 year more on the junior GP, and yeah, it was not a big problem. One time, we had the doubt of maybe yes, maybe no, but a really tiny doubt, but it was more or less clear.
Yeah.
And also, as per team, thanks to them because they they support me 1 year more on the junior GP, but with a confirmed place Moto3 class 2023.
Yeah, and I guess it's important to be patient with a young rider, right? To make sure that they're ready. Because if they come up too early, it can be a bad situation, I think.
Yeah. Better to, because we said on that moment, we need to, when we go up into the Moto3 World Championship, we need to be prepared. So better wait and do it well, more with the things more clear.
Sure.
Yeah.
David, how things are going really well this year. Is there a plan for you already? Are you talking about Moto2? I mean, are you thinking about the next steps? Because like Neil asked you, there's been already a strategy in place for a few years now.
Well, now at this moment we are like really focused on our target on give our best for try to fight for the Moto3 World Championship. That is the main objective, and then after that think on the next. But at the moment we are focused on Moto3, and as I did in the past with the junior GP, I'm young, so it will be not a problem to repeat another time Moto3, but
To be patient.
To be patient, and so let's see what the future departs us.
Yeah. David, we've seen in Kota, Le Mans, Mugello, you were fastest in every session during the weekend. And I think at Jerez and Barcelona, you were fastest in every session except one. This is not normal to see this in Moto3. Do you find that it gives you a kind of a mental advantage if you are dominating at the front every session?
Well, we are also, the team teach me like for work as if I want to be a one day a MotoGP rider, they teach me for work as they work. So work alone, try to prepare race, and then prepare also the next category, that is Moto2. So yeah, we try to work since Moto3 to try to do things well. Yeah.
Is there one rider that you like the look of? Vincent is putting a Red Bull cap in place. There's one rider that you like the example of a career, David. I mean, the way they are off the track, not just what they're doing on the track. The way they show their personality, the way they talk to the fans, the media. Is there someone that you like to follow or you think is a good example?
There are always examples. For example, Marquez's career for sure is Marquez and Valentino's career are super nice, and on the track and off the track also. How they, more Valentino, but how they interact also, how they grow up on MotoGP, and then also one important thing for me that both did winning on the 3 categories.
Okay, so that's like a goal of yours, right? You want to go all the way through.
Yeah, yeah. Since I was a little kid, when they told me what you want, before saying no, going to MotoGP, I remember I said I want to be world champion of the three categories, and like for me, it's like for close the class
Close
for
the chapter of
for
the yeah.
exactly for I was not looking for that word for close the chapter. Yes, that's important for me.
David, when we speak to a lot of riders in MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3, they are nice and they talk well, but you can tell they have an ego and they're very focused. But when we speak to you, you just seem like such a nice, open guy. I mean, it seems like a different approach for a Grand Prix rider. How do you see that?
Well, I just like I am like I am, and try to be as natural as possible. And then my mother always says that I need to go around I need to face up the life with a big smile. So I always go with that mentality.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Also, congratulations on the English, because I mean, Neil and I, we understand Spanish, we can speak, and we can hear how well you talk, in Spanish. And obviously, when you're trying to do it in English as well, sometimes it's difficult to say the same things. But I mean, you've made big progressions there.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, like the podcast, because for me it's very helpful for improving my English. This is very helpful because I am more hours talking English is better.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm done with questions. I don't know if there's anything else you want to ask.
Well, just finally, David, I mean, the World Championship, that has to be the objective this year. You've won 5 races from 7 so far this year. You look incredibly strong. I mean, you must feel that this is a great chance.
Yeah, no, for sure. We cannot lie that we have a good chance, and that's why we need to what is in our hands, like go and do it, and not get out of the way. So yeah, if we have the opportunity, we will go for it.
David, thank you ever so much for your time. Best of luck here this weekend in Assen, and hopefully we can speak to you again before the end of the season.
Yeah, nice. Always nice to talk here, and see you around the tracks around the world.
Dave, I'm going to mention 5 words now. I'd like you just to smile into the camera, and then we move on to a completely other topic, okay? Alpinestars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League.
I thought for a moment you were going to say it's coming home there, but that's only 3 words.
Harsh.
Sorry.
Well, the Alpinestars Paddock Pass Podcast League is Fantasy League is indeed coming home.
Dear, oh dear. What rank are you? Come on, tell us again.
I can't remember. I don't know, somewhere. Actually, I think I'm actually in the hundreds. So, yeah, no, I don't have it to hand. So I shall spare your blushes.
Well, out of almost 1,300 people looking to chase a prize at the end of the season, thanks to our friends at Alpinestars. Not a bad achievement, Dave. Here's hoping that you forget to set your team in at least half a dozen Grand Prix in the second half of the season. Neil and I won't bother talking about it anymore. But if you do want to play Fantasy MotoGP with us, then get your team set. Probably way too late now, but maybe you're still playing, but you're not part of our league. In which case, just search for Alpinestars Paddock Pass Podcast inside the MotoGP website, and then join us and see if you can win a goodie bag at the end of the year. And we also have another competition, right, Neil?
We do indeed. Yes, we have 3 pairs of roaming grandstand tickets for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone from the 4th of August to the 6th of August, which you can win if you join us on Patreon and become a Paddock Insider. So go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Paddock Pass Podcast. Sign up to become a Paddock Insider. Reply to the competition post that we've made. Just put your name underneath that and say that you're in, and we'll draw 3 names at random, and each name will get a pair of Roman Grandstand tickets for the British Grand Prix, which I think is a pretty cool prize. I was looking at online earlier, and it's £165 sterling per person for a grandstand seat at the British Grand Prix for the weekend. So I think it's a good prize. And what's more, you obviously get the benefits of our Patreon content as well, which is I think is better than ever. There's more stuff there to keep you interested and contented now than there was in the past, including our Paddock Note shows from Grand Prix weekends, exclusive interviews, exclusive shows that we make for our patrons, as well as access to our Discord page and the opportunity to ask us questions, which we will then answer in our shows after the Grand Prix. So yeah, well worth it.
Superbly done. Dave, we can't make any assurances about the weather at the British Grand Prix, but we can say that Silverstone's a pretty cool experience. I mean, a track with a lot of history, and you can see some of that actually at the Silverstone Museum, which is located right next to the main entrance. A lot of Formula One teams based around there, so if you're a motorsport buff and you've never been to the circuit before, then it's well worth a visit. We, sadly, at the moment, don't have thousands of Paddock Pass podcast patrons, only a couple of hundred, so it means signing up for the Patreon package is pretty good value, even if you don't end up winning one of those 3 pairs of tickets. But British Grand Prix is up next, Dave. It's a pretty good GP, isn't it? We're not being biased on that one.
No, I mean it's one of the great Grand Prix tracks. I mean the viewing experience is a little bit. There's always this Donington versus Silverstone argument, which is that the viewing experience at Donington, because of the layout, because it's all especially down Craner curves, fantastic place to sit. When it's not raining, you can sit there and really enjoy the racing. But the racing, as we saw this weekend with World Superbikes, was not terrific. Whereas at Silverstone, we have fantastic racing. It's one of the few tracks which is really well suited to MotoGP bikes. It's a great experience. It's just that you do have to sort of get into a grandstand to really get a view over the grandstands. We're in the new paddock, which is the F1 paddock. The wing, which is always a little bit sort of confusing. It's one of my, in terms of racing, it's one of my favorites. It's one of my very favorite tracks.
Any final comments, guys, for this podcast? Neil, did Agostini win enough for you, or maybe he was a bit disappointing in that respect?
Yeah, that last year in the MP was a bit crap, wasn't it, really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then he switched to Yamaha and then, won that one as well. Goodness, such high standards. Speaking of high standards, don't forget, guys, that Steve is bringing a lot of Superbike content, both on Patreon and through the podcast. So listen out for those shows. He's recording with Gordo, maybe Evo as well. We're not too sure if we can get him back on the show, but we're trying. Other than that, we'll be back next week to talk a bit more MotoGP and keep you fueled up with content in this summer break and until we get to Silverstone itself.